Welcome to This Just In, the show bringing you the latest advancements in healthcare, strategy, innovation, and public policy. And now, for the fastest voice in healthcare, here's your host, Justin Barnes.
Broadcasting live from ViVE 2023 in Nashville. I want to thank first CHIME and DHI for inviting us to their theater. I'm your host, Justin Barnes. We have a terrific show this morning focused on data governance and strategy. As many of you know, data governance plays a huge role in healthcare because data itself is everywhere within the walls of every healthcare system. From clinical images to metadata to text, healthcare data is abundant. Join us today as we sit down to discuss how the practice of data governance management can positively impact clinical care, as well as how it relates to automation and AI, cybersecurity, and enterprise imaging. My first guest, Mari Savickis, or better known as just Mari, Vice President of Public Policy for CHIME. So welcome, Mari, to the show. Great to have you here. First, you enjoying ViVE in Nashville?
I am. I taught yoga at 6:30 this morning under what I'm calling other duties as assigned.
That's awesome.
Join
Love
us
it.
tomorrow.
Fantastic. So let's talk some public policy, have some fun with it, maybe get controversial if we can. So how are policies being made or under consideration today impacting data governance and some factors, best practices that are impacting organizations as they attempt to manage their governance strategies such as workforce, financial pressures, so forth?
Well, data governance is about managing our data across the enterprise, and it's easy to think about, what are you doing about data governance? Many of the hospitals, health systems, providers are really in a bad position following the pandemic, and things weren't great before the pandemic when it comes to cyber. They are being attacked by hostile nation states who are extremely well funded. They're very sophisticated, and they're no match, honestly, for the average healthcare provider. An average healthcare provider is focused on delivering care. That's their primary mission. Their primary mission isn't typically they don't wake up every day thinking, what should I do around cybersecurity? It said no clinician ever.
Right.
Maybe 1%. Or maybe someone will disagree with me later. Yeah. Right. So, but it's becoming increasingly important that they put this in their, in front of them instead of behind them, because, and a lot of times too, it's very secretive, I got attacked or I got breached and we don't want to talk about that. Dirty little secret. You go on the naughty list. So I think that the door is slightly starting to open a little bit more, and there's more attention being paid to this, but it's really hard to wake up every day and say, let me think about my data governance strategy when you have a workforce shortage, right? Yeah. They're depleted. We have an economic downturn. They're paying more money to retain clinicians and even administrative staff. So the pressures are mounting, and they're almost too many to count.
Yeah. No, true. Just having this conversation actually at dinner last night about all the pressures that are hitting, CIOs, hospitals, health systems, CEOs, CFOs, decisions that they have to make. So I completely agree.
Most of them are actually, even the risk assessment, you would think HIPAA, right? Let's go back into our time machine. I love the time machine. What is it, 2 decades now? You haven't done your risk assessment? Well, yeah, maybe. But even the ones who've done it really well, you're still really going to be outmatched by a really sophisticated nation state who is intent. Every day they wake up saying, we're going to attack you and we're going to get in. And you know what? They're successful. And so it is an increasing challenge. I have one little data point. I love these. 86% of covered entities, HIPAA covered entities, have been found by OCR to be deficient on their risk assessment. And that's the baseline, right? We're just talking about the risk assessment. Right. So we're talking about data governance. It's way more than just doing a risk assessment. You have to actually start executing.
Right. Nope. Great point. 86%.
And then 85. I think it's an 85% for business associates.
Wow.
That's tough.
Wow.
15% are doing it well, I guess. I don't know.
So let's talk about something controversial.
Okay.
How long have you been on Capitol Hill?
Okay, let's talk about it, Justin. Let's get going.
20 years ago, we sat next to each other. So we've been doing this a long time.
Justin, 20 years ago.
Yeah,
ish.
That's how old we are.
We're so young.
Exactly. So in December, CHIME responded to Senator Warner's policy paper addressing cybersecurity in healthcare. So first, briefly explain the paper, what is addressing, and what was CHIME's concerns with relation to data governance?
Okay, let's just level set for a moment. This is 7.5 years of my life in the making, right? Nothing in Washington is fast. Nothing. It is like a lot of hurry up and wait. And Senator Warner, who is, he's a chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, really important guy. And if you'd asked me, 20 years ago, would I ever be interacting with a Senate Intelligence Committee? I'd say, no. Like, I'm in healthcare.
Yeah.
Hello, welcome to 2023.
That's right.
So he put together, after many, I'm going to say dozens, hundreds of conversations with stakeholders like CHIME and others, and asked them, what's going on. He's been a large proponent of cybersecurity in healthcare, following WannaCry. Remember that little thing?
Sure.
So this has been years in the making, and he finally put out what I'm calling out the shot across the bow. So this is like his, stake in the ground. It's a precursor to a bill, essentially. Now, does it mean it's going to translate exactly into a bill? We'll get to that in a moment. Mm-hmm. So it was about 30 pages or so. It was long. And our comment was equally long. I think I pulled 3 all-nighters writing it. Yeah. So, it had dozens of questions about should we do this? Should we do that? What about this? What about that? So right now, I think they're taking in all the feedback they've received from stakeholders. I'm sure you know, Justin, because everyone reads the news.
Yes.
The climate in DC is tough. Yeah. Politically tough.
Very tough.
So moving things across the finish line, it may be more of a piecemeal approach than the sun, the moon, the stars, and the universe.
All having to align. Yep.
Want me to keep going?
Yeah. No, it's perfect. So let's go into one of your recommendations from CHIME. It basically incent good cyber hygiene. I know the goal of cyber hygiene is to keep sensitive data secure and protect it from theft or attacks. How does good data governance strategy fit into good cyber hygiene?
In a perfect world, it fits, right? Yep. You do it. But we're not in a perfect world, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's the challenge is we're trying to, when we talk to policymakers, we say, no one ever says, I'm waking up today and I'm going to get cyber attacked. Said no provider ever. They wake up and they just want to say, I want to have a good day at work. I want to do a good job. I want to take care of my patients. They don't go to work thinking I'm going to get cyber attacked. They might think if you're a sizzle, oh God, I'm hoping I'm doing everything right. But, for example, we had a lawmaker call us a few months ago, and they had a safety net provider. I looked them up. I'm not going to name who it is. They have 2 people on their leadership team.
Wow.
So do you think that they have some amazing data governance strategy?
No.
So what we're saying is look, we completely understand this is shared responsibility. Got it. Check, check, check. However, you got to help us. And so, I'm here in the audience somewhere is Greg Garcia. He runs our sector. And I think it's now made up of 400 volunteers. We really have hit reboot on our sector, and we're working so hard to move the needle forward. We really are. And, I'm the policy person. I'm not the technical person. So it's a ton of volunteer hours, and these are product deliverables that are coming out, and they're things that you can start to implement. You don't have to eat the apple whole all at once or swallow the elephant, whatever analogy you want to use. Yep. You just have to start somewhere. Right. But that is going to take, for many, many providers, it's going to take incentives. And it's going to take a less punitive approach. Let's not put everyone on the naughty list, all right? Let's start by giving them some incentives instead of some punitive things, because typically things have been fairly punitive. And so what we're talking about is we will accept standards, but they have to be coupled with some help. And so, whether or not Senator Warner is able to push forward, say, whether it will be grants, will it be a cyber incentive program? Will it be ideally in my fantasy world, because I live there sometimes, will it be, built into Medicare reimbursement? That's the real long tail of this. Yep. That's what I think he's looking at. Other things too, like workforce. It's not just money. It's how do you shore up the workforce? Who's going to be doing this work? We already have a shortage, so we're really starting from behind. These are just some of the things. We could go on and on, but 20 pages is a lot to cover.
So where would somebody start if they want to engage and learn, but also let their voice be heard? Inside a CHIME, what can they join or participate or work group to join or something like that?
So, all right. Health Sector Coordinating Council. Come see us. You can email me and my colleagues at policy@chimecentral.org. Member or not, come find us. We will point you in the right direction. It's Greg's group, okay? Yep. You start there. There's many work streams. And inside of this, they have deliverables. And these are jointly developed products with the government, okay? With HHS, our partner, and it is a shared responsibility, and the industry. So, for example, wait for it, everyone. I'm going to use an acronym. Wait for it. HICCUP, okay? I didn't name it. All you need to do is HICCUP, and you just Google 405D. It's such a sexy name. It's named for a part of statute. We don't have to get into it, but it's a set of cybersecurity best practices. And you know what? They're not mandatory yet, but it's coming. The standards and the mandates will be coming, and hopefully they'll be coupled with some resources from the federal government. Like another thing we asked for, and this was a GAO recommendation, was, hey, should we have like a backstop for cyber insurance? Yeah, check. We should have that too.
Absolutely.
So you got crop insurance, flood insurance.
Yep.
We need some cyber insurance because some of our members are uninsurable, especially if you've suffered a cyber attack. So these are the kinds of things that when you come into our umbrella, the umbrella of the sector, you can join these work streams. You can get access. The products anyone can get them. They're free. So Hiccup is one of them. Greg asked me to mention that they're going to put out a clinical series of vignettes. That's coming out this week. Hiccup 2.0 being updated. It's getting a little facelift. Just like 2 weeks ago, HHS in conjunction with the sector put out an implementation guide. It's like 82 pages. Get some coffee, sit down, snuggle up with that, and get reading. So again, don't eat the whole elephant all at once.
Yep. No, obviously that has been a huge piece of my career, is engaging these work groups, learning from my peers, and making a difference. Going to Capitol Hill, letting our voice be heard, helping guide policy. So phenomenal. We have about 2 or 3 more minutes. What do you hope to get out of the next few days here at ViVE?
Well, I'm a consummate networker, raging extrovert, so I'll be probably talking to
raging
everyone.
Raging extrovert.
Just seeing people in person, it's nice. It's nice to see you. I haven't seen you in 20 years.
Yeah.
How are you doing,
Same
Dawson?
here.
You doing okay? Okay, great.
Phenomenal, actually.
Okay, tell me one thing about yourself that's not work related.
Oh gosh, not work related.
We're going to diverse off the script for a second.
No, I just have enjoying life to the fullest every single day, to be honest. Just kind of enjoying myself. I love this sector, but also about 6-7 years ago, I decided to take a little bit of time off, enjoy myself, and work with friends. So I got some great people, here actually at ViVE now that I'll sync up with. But really, when I went back to work, just took some time off, went back to work, and work with people that I like and love. So that's what life's all about. It's
really nice to take off that time, because you know what? What's that expression about? Life
is short.
Well, life is short, and on your tombstone, they'll never say oh, he or she worked so hard.
Exactly.
So good for you. What else can I tell you about? CHIME is here. Come find us. policy@chimecentral.org. We will answer all your questions. Doors always open, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Well, engage and learn. Engage CHIME Central.
And volunteer for your sector. We need your help, okay? We will help you. We'll be your champions in Washington, but you got to help us show up and volunteer, and signing up and joining the sector is free.
Well, and volunteering means you're going to learn a lot. You're going to meet new peers. You're going to meet, get educated yourself, help lead your company, help lead your sector, your industry, let your voice be heard. It makes a huge difference. Yeah, and you're going to hear from some of these folks who are on it too. So I'm sure they're going to take it much further than I took it. How are we doing on time? Good? Cool. We're good.
Right.
We're
Thanks
good.
so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Mari. Bye. Have a good one. Welcome back to the show, gentlemen. Welcome to the stage, Tim Dawson, Chief Technology Officer, Canon Medical, and Drex DeFord, Healthcare Strategist and CIO at CrowdStrike. Welcome back, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Great to have you here today.
Mari's a hard act to follow.
She is a hard act to follow, for sure. We're going to do a quick mic check here, make sure everybody's a little closer.
All right.
Perfect.
All right, how's that?
Excellent.
Good?
Good?
Perfect.
All right.
So, first of all, when did you guys get in town?
I came in Saturday night, late.
Okay.
And so yesterday was really my first full day.
Is it good?
Yeah.
I came in yesterday morning, and I was lucky enough to take the first flight in because all of my colleagues were ensnared in travel challenges all over the U.S.
Heard. Yeah, I actually got in on Wednesday to just make sure I was here, but also prepared and prepped and all that kind of good stuff. So I've been enjoying Nashville. I love Nashville, by the way.
Yeah.
We should just focus on that for a little bit. Great city. Great to have you guys here today. So, first of all, question, why should a CIO today have data governance as a key component of their cybersecurity and their cyber strategy? We just talked a bit with Mari, got a little bit of lay of the land, but what are your thoughts?
Well, one thing I would say is you could ask that question either way, right? You could say, why should you have cybersecurity as part of your data governance, or why should you have data governance as part of your cybersecurity?
Yep.
Because fundamentally, you have to know what data you have and how to secure it, and the two of them go hand in hand.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's know what you have. You can't protect it if you don't know what you have, where it is, what you're doing with it. I think it's also really interesting that we kind of have a strange situation now that has sort of occurred over the past few years, and that is the crown jewels of your data may not be where you think they are. We think about them being in electronic health records or other tools like that. But we have frontline workers and analysts who are really good at pulling data out of those systems and putting them in other systems and turning them into stuff they can use to improve their operations. So the crown jewels might not be where they're at. And then we use a lot of third-party stuff too. Not only applications, but we have outside non-employees who move forward and actually do work inside the health system. So knowing who has access to that data and where it is, it's just critically important if you're going to secure it.
Well, and Mari, our first guest here today, talked about 86% of facilities don't have proper governance strategies. I mean, that's just amazing in protections.
Yeah, I think
86%.
Sorry.
Wow, that's a lot.
It is. And she sort of called it out, like that's just the baseline. That's just you've done a risk assessment. That doesn't mean that you've done anything about it yet, just that you've done an effective risk assessment. It's a big hole.
Yeah.
Right. When you think about why it matters that it be secure. Right? So when I think about cybersecurity, I always go back to the CIA, right? Confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And there are different reasons why each of those are important, but the last two kind of come down to patient safety, right? Of course, we don't want anybody stealing our data,
right?
But what matters more to me is that the healthcare system be able to operate. And I once heard a CIO tell me, there is not enough paper in the world to run our operations if all of the systems are down.
Right.
And I mean, that was a really powerful way to think about it. And you need to make sure that the systems are up. Yep. And so the other thing you have to think about is the fact that, as Mari said, the attackers are out there all the time. Right. You will be hacked. And the question is, what are you going to do about it? And how are you going to go after and be able to recover operations?
Nope. Very true. So what are one or two or three key strategies for keeping data secure?
Let me tie back to what he just said. I think this idea of certainly doing the risk assessment and understanding where all of this stuff is important. We see sort of a transition happening now in healthcare cybersecurity. This transformation from, you hear cyber pros talk about it as taller castle walls and deeper, wider moats. Our goal in cybersecurity for years and years and years has been keep the bad guy out. Don't let them into the network. But I think that's kind of changed over time. You still have to do that, but in the spirit of resiliency and being able to stay up and running to do the mission, this idea of speed has become very important. The bad guys are obviously getting over the castle walls and across the moats and inside the network. So the goal becomes, how do you find the bad guys and kill them fast and not create any kind of disruption to business, clinical, or research operations? And if you can do that 24/7, 365, you have successfully built a program that not only keeps many bad guys out, but helps you find and kill the bad guys who get inside the network very, very quickly, which doesn't cause disruptions, which goes to that resilience point you were making earlier.
Yeah. Well, I'm always reminded of the chaos monkey, that we've heard about, that, that these systems have done to manage resiliency. And if you think about how could you apply that to our systems to make sure that we keep the bad guys out? If you're constantly tearing the systems apart and redeploying them from scratch, they've got nowhere to hide. If they manage to get to breach into a single server and they start sort of building their backdoors from there, and then the next day that server is gone because you've recreated a new virtual server in its place, they've got nowhere to go, right? And so that's, I think, some of the things that you need to think about as we're developing systems and deploying them going forward is how to make sure that happens, whether it be on premises or in the cloud.
One of the things too, I think, when you talk about what are the few things that you need to do to make sure that you have a better program, the communication part of it can't be overstated. Helping clinicians and researchers and your business operations teams understand what you're doing in cybersecurity and why it's important. And not that I'm doing cybersecurity because I'm trying to make your life miserable, but I'm doing cybersecurity because I really want to make sure that our operations can continue to run and we can keep taking care of patients and families. And that requires a lot of special care and attention in those communications, going to the staff meetings and doing all the stuff you need to do to make sure that you're hearing what they're telling you so you can understand what you may be breaking or what problems you might be causing in cybersecurity, but helping them understand why you're doing the things that you're doing to protect them and to protect their patients. Yeah.
Excellent. So what's a starting point? I mean, what's the best practice? I like to, my show focuses a lot on best practices and key strategies. It can be somewhat overwhelming if you think about, oh my gosh, my data governance strategy. But what's a starting point for a CIO? If you're new, even if you're a new CIO, or decided, I'm going to take this seriously, or we're going to take it to another level. Where's a starting point for the average CIO?
Well, again, data governance is a great place to start. Like, understand where your data is, and then understand what systems are that operate on it, and then who has access to those. You have to have that baseline understanding of what's going on in your organization to be able to do that. And we're in medical imaging, so our background is making sure that the access to those images, is unassailable, right? That they can always get those when they need them, and that really kind of depends not just on any one particular operation or application. It's the whole system. It's the connectivity from end to end with that, and you have to have a plan.
Excellent.
Yeah, it's not the easiest thing in the world. I mean, data governance is very, very difficult. And often the information that we need to be able to make decisions, we have to pull from multiple systems. And so, again, if you don't have a great track of where the data is, how sensitive it is, and how important it is to the operation, it's hard to make good decisions about how much cybersecurity, how much effort I should put against protecting that particular asset or those sets of assets. And when you don't have that information, your tendency then is to say, I have to protect everything at the highest level possible, which is probably the most expensive version of what you're going to create when you're trying to do cybersecurity in the effort to protect the data.
Right. And you have to also manage and eliminate the duplication of data, right? So if you're worried about data being stolen, having lots of copies of it, or copies of it in drawers and things like that, depending on the kind of imaging, for example, that you do with visible light imaging, is very often not well managed. And actually keeping that stuff confidential can be really challenging if you've got it all over the place. So centralizing it is generally seen as a good idea. Centralize that and then provide broad access to that. The flip side, though, is if you centralize everything, now you've got one giant thing that is a really enticing target, right? So you need to make sure that that's secure, and it's secure in a way that can't be easily overwritten, that you've got tight controls on it, or again, maybe there are ways to federate that data and to make sure that but it's done in a consistent way so that you can manage that and that you can provide the right access.
So kind of building on that, and Drex, what you brought up before, how do you balance the needs of cybersecurity with clinical needs such as performance and accessibility?
Yeah, I mean, that is also a very, very tough job for cyber pros and for CIOs. I kind of go back to the communication piece, right? You have to have the conversations regularly with clinical business and research operations staff, helping them understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. And that's tough because, look, I mean, I can tell you just from experience, I've been a CIO for 30 years. When you go into the clinical staff meeting and do a presentation about information services and you talk about cybersecurity, you're going to get a lot of pushback from those folks.
Absolutely.
But don't let that be the reason that you don't go to those meetings. They really appreciate it when you're there. They will tell you after the fact, we're really glad you showed up. Took a lot of guts to come and sit in front of all of us and sort of have this conversation with us. We know you're listening because we see you then go back and make some changes that really help. And then you tell us about the changes that you made and the effect that they had. But it's also good for them. And what will happen sometimes in those groups too is that you'll wind up with a sort of an evangelist that comes out of that group. You give them good cybersecurity messages. You help them understand why it is that you're doing what you're doing. And you'll be walking down the hallway and you'll hear one clinician talking to another clinician like weirdly about some cybersecurity thing. And so it's a team sport in so many ways, cybersecurity. And certainly that extends to the communication part of your staff, helping them understand what you're doing and why, and understanding the impact that's having on their ability to operate well.
Yeah, so that's critical is helping people understand why. Start with why, right? And then the flip side is also to listen to them and understand what their challenges are with what you're rolling out, and to come up with new ways, right? So, this morning on the main stage, they were talking about how technology is a source of great innovation, but it can also be a challenge. But then you flip that around, and the innovation can then address the challenges that we've inadvertently created. And so, having the conversations about which part of this is difficult, how can we deal with that? There are other challenges too where you can kind of take a different approach, where break the glass type of needs, things like that. There are certain situations where, for medical necessity, all of the restrictions we put in place are just going to eventually kill somebody if you don't get them out of the way. So you need to have mechanisms to do that in an audited way such that you can ask questions later about why did this happen. But ultimately, you need to be able to unblock that so that critical patient care happens, and then the standard access controls are restored.
When you have those interesting break the glass situations too, those are real opportunities to learn about why did we have to break the glass? What are we not doing in our normal operations process that created this urgent situation that we had to sort of violate all of our policies? And if you learn from that, if you make your processes better, and sometimes it's just training and sometimes it's the technology, but if you learn from it, it makes a big difference in the balance of the challenge between how do I get my work done with all this cybersecurity stuff you're giving me?
Right.
Is there a best practice or an idea that we can give the audience? I mean, do you schedule these meetings proactively, these sessions with providers and clinicians? And how is there a thought like do it quarterly, semi-annually, annually? What's your cadence? Talk about communication and the importance of it.
Yeah, I think that if you're doing it, so for me, when I was in the CIO seat, I tried to fit into meetings that were already going to happen with the surgical team or the CFO's team, whatever the case may be. I would just show up to those, be a part of those, be an agenda item, listen. Sometimes they would give me a pretty good chunk of the meeting. Sometimes they would give you the whole meeting because they just thought it was amazing that somebody else from the organization wanted to come and talk to them.
That's excellent.
And so, I think the rhythm is something that you decide in your own organization. What feels right, what feels like enough and not too much, because also then there's the other challenge of kind of being too over broadcasted. Right. It's that would be my recommendation. Just try to fit into the meetings that are already there. I think you'll be welcome if you ask about coming.
That's great advice.
That's a great point. And then as a vendor working with providers, right, when we come in and they're going to do an upgrade or they're going to move to a new version of our software, that is a great time to have that conversation about cybersecurity practices and where are we with things and what new capabilities can we roll out, and understanding strategically where's the provider going with their cybersecurity strategy, and how can we help with that? That's a critical piece of that.
I love to hear that. I mean, honestly, it is third-party risk and the challenges that we have with products that come into the healthcare environment that aren't secure out of the box or weren't built with security in mind, that we have to try to figure out how to retrofit. Medical devices in particular, come to mind. Those are such hard challenges for healthcare organizations because they can't do what they would normally do to those devices because they void warranties and cause other problems. They're really important to the delivery of healthcare, so you can't really just say no. You have to figure out a way to kind of bridge that gap. And so coming in out of the gate, like you guys do, talking about cybersecurity, here's how we're secured. We want to make sure we fit in your model is incredibly important.
It's fantastic. So, closing question, about 5 minutes left. As data volumes continue to explode, how will data governance and cybersecurity evolve?
So one thing that I think about that, again, medical imaging, the data volumes are huge. It used to be, we went from megabytes to gigabytes, terabytes to petabytes, and so customers managing many terabytes or petabytes of data have a lot of challenges. You can't simply back that up to tape and restore it if you get corrupted, right? You don't have the years it would require to bring all of your systems back online if you do that sort of thing. So there are storage technologies that can be brought to bear. There are ways of making sure that your data is structured in a way that's not proprietary, in a way that can be easily understood and reconstituted. Those sort of approaches are absolutely critical. Utilizing storage technologies instead of just having a direct access drive, but storing using object storage. Protocols like S3, which don't have to go into Amazon S3, but can also just apply to a local storage device. If you use those are encrypted and managed by certificates, such that even if the hacker gets on the system, they don't have access to that data. And so, there are strategies for that, and then you can make those things write once and not overwritable except for during certain scenarios. So there are a lot of strategies like that you can bring to bear to make sure that the data you manage the integrity and availability of that, and then you come back around with the confidentiality.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it's, from the cloud perspective, just with volumes going up, with more data than ever before, the way that we're leveraging it, the cloud is the future. We run a lot of stuff in our data center today, but the cloud is really where we're going. More processing power. And it also creates the situation where, in my experience, we buy a bunch of hardware and then we don't buy hardware for a couple of years, and then we buy a bunch of more hardware a couple of years later, and that sine wave drives CFOs crazy. So while the cloud may not be cheaper, it may be in some cases, one of the things that really comes with it is the benefit of being able to predict the cost because of the work that you're doing. And as new workload comes on, you can predict that cost. CFOs love that because they can start to see what things are going to cost in the future. And in all of that, obviously cloud security is incredibly important. Absolutely. And we see a lot of misconfigurations of clouds and other things that cause those clouds to be breached. So back to the fundamentals, even in the cloud, a lot of fundamental work needs to be done just to protect that data.
That's excellent. So we've got about 2 minutes or so left. What do you guys hope to achieve the next couple of days here at ViVE?
I love coming here and talking to people, face to face, and I've already mentioned that earlier. Meeting with prospective customers, meeting with existing customers, just meeting with other people like Drex that I love talking to and learning things from. It's fantastic.
Love it.
It's been fun so far, and I think the next few days are going to be great. I'm a past CHIME chair. I have so many friends that are here. And so for me, it's just coming and seeing people, especially after the pandemic. There are still people who are like, this may be their first real trip out.
Right.
And so seeing people live and in person and being able to give them a hug, it's awesome. I love it.
Totally agree. Excellent. Tim, Drex, thank you so much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
For the show. Thank you very much. Thanks. Have a great conference. Oh, thank you, gentlemen.
Great. Nicely done.
Awesome. Fantastic.
Nicely done.
Welcome back. Welcome to the stage. Thank you very much for joining me today. So I have Jeff Hendrikse, Vice President, Enterprise Imaging from Canon Medical, Randi Gibbs, Solution Architect, Canon Medical, and Kim Garriott, Chief Innovation Officer, Global Healthcare and Life Sciences NetApp. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So first of all, when did you guys get in town?
I arrived yesterday around lunchtime. So
Excellent.
Yep, last night.
Last night?
Yep.
Same last night.
Cool. And what do you guys hope to achieve over the next couple of days here?
Well, for me, I just want to look around. This show is centered on innovation. It's always nice to see new things.
Yeah, exactly. Just want to make some new relationships and see what the latest innovation trends are out there and have some fun.
Take in Nashville.
Yeah, take in Nashville, see what the trends are going and kind of what the new buzzwords are out there this year.
You got it. Love it. Yeah, no, it's always this is my my second ViVE. It's a great show, and obviously the hosts are phenomenal as well. So let's keep on going with data governance. So what is the importance of data governance to enterprise imaging? Who wants to start? Jeff?
Well, maybe we should start with the definition of enterprise imaging.
Please.
Hey, let's talk about that for a minute. So enterprise imaging was, it's been around quite a while, but let's talk about the definition. A work group between HIMSS and SIM, the Society of Imaging Informatics and Medicine, came up with a definition of enterprise imaging, and it's about the strategies. I'm going to get this right. Hey, Kim was on the group that defined it. Hopefully I get this right. So it's the strategies, the policies, and the workflows around how we, across the healthcare enterprise, capture, use, view, share, exchange, analyze your data, your imaging data, again, across all the different imaging specialties, in a way that complements all the rest of the patient data in the EMR. So that's what enterprise imaging is all about. So if you think about that definition, it's just rife with data governance issues, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and one of the core tenets of enterprise imaging and really, how we brought this together in the early days, dates back to 2013. We're celebrating our 10-year anniversary of enterprise imaging this year. And data governance serves as the foundation because it's about making imaging and all multimedia content available across the care continuum. And without proper data governance, there's just no way that interoperability is going to be there.
That's excellent.
Yeah, my background is long-time clinical. So from the clinical aspect, really just making sure that the data integrity is withheld under data governance, making sure that that data works for the patient and the physician as they move through their clinical experience.
That's excellent. So how do you see the workflows within enterprise solution being of importance?
Yeah, they're very important. We always like to say one workflow does not fit all, right? So careful consideration has to be given to each use case, to each specialty that is generating or producing imaging as well as consuming imaging. And to be able to ensure data relevance, we really have to, look at where that data is first acquired, and that's in the workflow, and how it's acquired, how it's labeled, and the factors assigned to it during that acquisition really sets the tone for the value of that data and the relevancy it's going to have as you present it in the EMR. So it's the workflow is where it starts.
Excellent.
And maybe just to drill in a little bit further on that level, a lot of this started in radiology, where you have industry standards, DICOM. DICOM is super helpful in terms of connecting the devices, but also super helpful in terms of the way we can capture the patient metadata, all the patient data. Lots of customers think that when you move into enterprise imaging, these problems are solved in the same way, and that's really not true, is it, Kim?
Right, no.
So many different ways that we can capture the data. Think about, let's say, a dermatologist capturing some photos of a skin lesion on a patient's arm. How do those photos get put into an enterprise imaging system? How do they get associated with the patient metadata? So really, as Kim was saying, when you think about enterprise imaging, there's just a wide variety of different workflows and different modality types, different things that you need to think about as you piece together your entire portfolio. Because in the end, what you want is a cohesive data set associated with the patient.
Yeah, because in radiology, we are fortunate that we have a radiology information system, or lab, that we have a lab information system, but we don't have a wound care. We do have a wound care management system, but it's not integrated usually with other systems to receive orders or encounters. So it's very different when you move outside of the traditional imaging areas like cardiology and radiology.
When you standardize those workflows as well, it really sets you up so that when you get to the point where you start using analytics and AI, you have the standard data, because when you acquired the data, you used a workflow that was across the board. So your data actually means something.
Right.
Yeah, Randy, I think that's a super important point, isn't it? It's lots of times you can address a workflow, but there's another layer to it. It's almost like the strategic element of the data, right? We want to be able to solve this workflow, but we want to solve it in a way where the data is captured. It's captured in a neutral kind of way, a way that makes the data more strategic for future uses, whether that's applied towards AI, whether that's applied to population health, or things that we don't even know about yet. We want to make sure we're capturing that data strategically, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
And regarding, I guess, AI and machine learning, how does data governance need to kind of evolve, keeping those things in mind?
Greatly.
I was going to say also
profound.
Standardizing it so that your data is correct, because when you turn AI on or you start using data for analytics, you really want to make sure that the data that you acquired is working for you, that it doesn't have, a lot of times in healthcare, I don't know how it always happens, but you get these anonymized fields, even in regular patient studies or imaging, and those fields throw everything off.
So standardization,
Yeah, the standardization is key, and it's often an area that's overlooked. We don't think about, when we bring together different types of imaging and multimedia, that they do need to complement each other, and it does need to have a reflection of standardization, right? A head is a head, not a head and a brain and a skull, to really drive that. And we've recognized that, especially in workflows like digital photography and digital pathology. But in digital photography, we hadn't really thought about superficial anatomy. Radiology, really, we've got internal anatomy down. But it's what is the right balance of naming nomenclatures for, what a dermatologist wants to see versus what 99% of all the other, clinicians want to see. So we're trying to tackle this at a society and an academic level where we're starting small, with body part, right? So what will we call, and this was driven by digital pathology workflows, what will we call and agree on the standard anatomy? So SIM and HIMSS is working together to create a consortium to drive adoption of an existing standard, not the creation of a new one. We have plenty of standards, but let's adopt. We've had them for a long time, SNOMED CT, LOINC, but yet we're not unified in how we use those standards. So it has a long way to go, and it has a lot of ramifications as organizations, just start to capture images without really stepping back to think about the importance of the data that's being captured along with that image.
Excellent. So you mentioned SIM and HIMSS. Are there work groups, or what are the groups helping? Is there specific? I do a lot of work group work. So is there something in there that can engage or learn?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we founded the HIMSS SIM Enterprise Imaging Community in 2014. Now we have over 700 members.
Excellent.
And it is a work group within that community that is moving forward and sponsoring the good work that we're going to bring forward here. You'll hear a little bit more about it at HIMSS and then a little bit more at SIM, but we're ready to really get going on it.
Terrific. So what are top 3 things that we should have in place before we start the adoption of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and the analytics to ensure a smoother or smoothest adoption and transition?
For me, it's about the elements of trust and how this is working from the workflow. A lot of discussion in the industry about things like drift, and I don't necessarily want to get into that technology, but I was reminded of a story. A radiologist, Dr. Raymond Geis, was describing at a trade show a couple of years ago. He talked about a situation in which a new CT scanner was implemented. It was a dual energy CT scanner. And months later, they started to understand that the priority assigned by the AI engine in the workflow engine was taking all of those scans and putting them at the very top. And they didn't really notice that at first. But it was because the dual energy CT scanner was triggering something in the AI algorithm that caused this problem. So there are things that we need to pay attention to in AI as we start to trust the machine. We need to make sure we have those governance processes in place to say, okay, is this working the way we intend it to? Is the outcome what we're expecting? Are these the right things that we should be doing? So for me, it's making sure that in advance of thinking about the adoption of AI, you've already started to think about what's that feedback loop? How do I know that it's working within the right parameters?
I think that's a great point. Also, I think organizations need to determine, will they be the recipient of AI algos, or will they participate in the development and the training? Will they contribute data in an anonymized way to be able to ensure the greatest levels of data diversity? So I think that those are really just important governance factors to look at, deciding, if you do want to participate in the development of models or the training of models, what use cases are you going to go after first, and what are going to offer the most value back to your organization? So I think really understanding how your role should be in that, and then also what is most important in your clinical practice and the use cases that you should prioritize, because there's a whole world and hundreds of vendors chasing tiny little algorithm development, right? So what's important to you and your organization?
Excellent.
Really training the staff, the clinical staff, to assure, again, that data integrity. So making sure that the acquisition of the data is solid, that when you go to deploy these AI analytics, that your integrations work with those applications, making sure you're getting good data. Yep. A lot of the clinical staff, when you start talking about some of this, they say, oh, it's so technical. Oh, it's not. You've just never been shown the other half of the picture.
Yeah.
It's excellent.
Being prepared for the adoption as well, right? I think you both alluded to, just the trust that's going to be needed for clinicians to feel comfortable in this AI-assisted workflow. Yes. So to not overlook that human element and that adoption that has to, be cared for, and only through really showing that trust between the data and the humans is that, really going to get the level of adoption needed.
No, you're spot on. Actually, John Halamka was my guest a couple weeks ago, and he actually brought up that specific point in a lot of his AI research and machine learning. So very cool. In a recent interview, actually a good friend of the show, Anish Chopra, first CTO of the U.S., said he believes data governance is probably the biggest gap from best performing organizations to the least performing organizations. So what are the positive financial impacts, positive or negative, introduced by the pursuit of improved data governance?
I think Randi has a really great example for that.
Yeah, so what I see in day-to-day is poor data integrity. So, patient comes into the ER with a headache and they were across a clinic, at a clinic, earlier in the day they had a head CT, but, when the hospital goes to query that other database, they're querying what their label is, which is CT brain, right? So it doesn't pick the head up. And then, you repeat that study and then all of this sudden, you send the bill out and you were the last man in, so you're not getting paid.
Right.
That's one of the biggest financial impacts that I see in healthcare. Not only that, but we're repeating a study with radiation, so there's some health effects to that as well. But financially, it can be a really big hit if you don't have solid data integrity.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think to add on to that, we'll use that digital photography example again, right? And the naming of those photos and actually just the ingestion of those photos into a centralized system that will make viewing available by all the members on the care team will help to avoid, in a wound care situation, a patient is discharged, they're sent home, the home health provider comes out, they see, a pretty nasty looking wound. Without the visual reference of that actual photo, we only have to go by the subjective text. And so many times patients are transported to an ED because the home health provider thinks that the wound has actually gotten worse when it's actually gotten better. And that's an inconvenience on the patient. It's undue stress on the healthcare system, and who pays for that? So I think that's very important in that realm as well. And I've got a couple others, but I think you've got one.
Lots of things right on the tip of the tongue, isn't there? One of the other things, I was thinking about your questions with Drex and Tim just moments ago. They talked a little bit about data explosion.
Yes.
I think one of the real areas of data governance that we need to talk about a little bit more is how long are we going to keep the data available for our patients? Right, there's an explosion of data. Already some of the data sets are enormous.
Yes.
Lots of institutions are dabbling in digital pathology where the study sizes are even bigger. Are we actually going to keep all of this data for all time as we're currently doing? And I think we need to have better governance around that. And I think that drives cost directly. Right?
Absolutely.
If we eliminate a whole bunch of the storage, we start to free up cost in the system again. So again, I think that's a really important topic that we need to bring to the center.
Yeah, and maybe the conversation isn't around the deletion of data because we know that has great value, but there's a very important conversation that has to go on between IT and the clinical community to ensure that data can be tiered appropriately as it ages. So it's always available, maybe just not available in that millisecond retrieval time. But there's a huge cost opportunity to be able to look at doing that in a more reasonable way, and organizations are really missing out on a very important cost factor. And to the point of digital pathology, right, we're seeing single images in digital pathology that are, on average 1.5 to 3 gigabytes. But there are images being generated that are 200 gigabytes just per a single image.
Wow.
And there are research organizations that are going to want to retain those. So you can't continue to keep those on, solid state disks. You need to be able to move them to slower storage.
Agreed.
Are there any best practices there on timing? And share with my audience. I'd love to, what are your thoughts there on timing or storage or how long you keep some of these articles? And
I haven't seen any yet. In our customer base, the objects are stored forever. There is some discussion about whether we should tier them or whether we should compress them or delete them. But in the end, in our customer base, no.
Yeah.
Do you see that too?
Yeah, so it really varies by organization and what their tolerance is. I think standardly many organizations want to keep the last 3 years of exams on the fastest retrieval. But certainly there are studies that we know that we could even promote, past that. These chest x-rays that are performed every day on an inpatient, unless there's a complication, not every chest x-ray needs to be staved. But we also have to look again at how we're labeling the data because state board of health regulations have different retention regulations depending on the type of study that it is. If it's a mammography study, it needs to be retained 30 years past the date of the exam. Okay. OSHA studies have to be kept for the life of the patient. Can we identify a mammo study and keep it safe? Yes. Can we identify an OSHA study? No. So how do you, really label your data, again, at the point of ingestion during workflow so you have the most data to work against and be able to sort and filter through?
Excellent. That's good advice. Randy?
I'd really like to see regulation brought up to standards that are more fluent with digital versus film. I don't know that they've ever really updated those since we've been on film. Back in the day, we stood in the film library and we manually purged films. Sure. So it would be nice to see some updated regulation that supports more of the digital workflows.
That's great. So my show focuses a lot on best practices. So kind of in closing, what advice would you offer audience here, everybody listening, just from your perspective and and how you see this, data governance and strategy?
Yeah, for me, it comes down to the concept of data neutrality. I really, truly believe that we don't yet know all of the different uses of data. And so making sure that data is coded in a standard way, making sure that data is accessible, whether that's to a human user or whether that's to dozens of AI machines that are going to be running overnight on the data, making sure that the data is in a format that's accessible and usable at all times is really core for me and something that I would recommend to our listeners.
I think take the time to be thoughtful. We all are trying to race, and organizations have precious few resources, but it's kind of that work smarter, not harder. So take the time to develop a data governance strategy to understand how you are going to ingest data, what is required to make that data the most valuable it can be, and to hold your organization accountable as different types of imaging or different service areas come on board, and really kind of hold to that strategy that you've developed.
That's excellent.
Yeah, as we kind of ran to the digital era, I think it would we kind of put the cart before the horse. I think backing up and really looking at your data from the last few years as you acquired those meaningful use, in making sure that you go back, look at that data. If you've done a migration with an EHR or a PACS, you'll know your gaps. You know where to go fix it. Really go fix that data and put the workflows in place to support. Make sure you acquire the data that you need.
That's excellent. So we have a little bit more time. So put your thinking caps on, because why don't we dive in a little bit to just best practices in general. So you talk about data governance, data strategy, but where's a starting point, I guess, in your individual perspective? So if you're a CIO, and ask Tim and Drex the same question, if you're a CIO or a leader of a health system, kind of where do you start with some of this? Because it can be overwhelming. We actually heard 86% haven't even started, haven't even passed some of the initial testing for this. And so where do you start as a CIO and a leader of a healthcare system if you want to get, a little data governance strategy, moving forward and better together?
So I think you start by listening. Go into your different service areas, understand what their workflows are, understand what, as a clinician, they need to see in the data, and then that will help drive your strategy. So I really think before action is taken,
absolutely,
listening needs to occur.
Fantastic.
For me, the advice is start small or start with a specific scope. A healthcare organization of very significant size, lots of things going on at all times, competing priorities and whatnot. Pick something that's small. Start somewhere and build that groundswell of what we can do with data governance.
Excellent.
Yeah, understanding your different service lines, I think, is key. understanding the needs of each of the service line. And again, like Jeff said, start small, ingest one at a time, find yourself an enterprise solution that fits your service lines, and really hound in on what's needed within each one and ingest those into your enterprise solution one at a time. Make sure you do a good job at it. You don't want to just turn and burn it, have a bad experience. Because if you ingest those one at a time and you build that trust, you're going to have a lot more buy-in from the rest of your facility.
Excellent. So thinking ahead a little bit of the crystal ball, where do you see, I guess the leaders, because everybody wants to be a leader, where do you see in 3 to 5 years from now this evolving, and what will the most innovative organizations be doing that you would recommend? Where do you think they're going to, in 3 to 5 years from now?
Yeah, I think if you want to be innovative, you start with your clean data set, and it gives you a lot of opportunity to participate in things like population health, AI, analytics, and you can really drive and be an innovator when you're able to participate in those.
Excellent. You're gonna.
My train of thought, didn't I? The question was, where are we going to be in 5 years, or what should we be doing now? Yeah.
What are they going to be doing to be a leader?
For me, I think it's about focusing a little bit on what you talked about in terms of the data quality, but I also think it's a little bit about the platform, making sure we've got the scale in mind of what we're trying to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
In today's world, a lot of our clinical systems are oriented around the physicians. They're or techs or nurses, but there is a certain finite set of people within a hospital that are operating on the data, interacting with our information systems. I think in the near future, we're going to see more and more deployment of AI, and whether that's inside of the EMR or whether it's specialized AI working on image sets or whatever, there's going to be more and more AI. I think we want to think about each of those AI algorithms as another user. And so if we have now tens of those things or hundreds of those things operating on the data, we need to be thinking about the back end of our systems. And how is it that we're going to actually scale and make that information accessible by all of those algorithms?
Excellent.
Yeah, I think it's to go along with the comments made, I think it is really watching what innovation is coming out in the market. We are seeing just amazing advances. I think we can remember 10 years ago, I think it was Watson, IBM Watson that won the Jeopardy game, right? And that was run on a supercomputer, right? Lots of computing process. And now with GPT, sorry about that, it's early, I haven't had my coffee too much. With ChatGPT, we can literally download an application to our PC and run that right on our home PC, right? So keep an eye on the technologies, keep an eye on what's going on in the cloud and the capabilities coming from the cloud, and be open to thinking about things differently, because there's just an amazing amount of tech coming our way and record speeds that we can take advantage of.
That's excellent. So thinking about trends even, what are you guys seeing? For again, I go back to the CIO, a lot of the audience here. What are the trends they should be looking forward to or looking out for in this sector? Obviously we're having a lot of. On the negative side, we have obviously a lot more attacks than ever before. Nation states are coming at us in every way. We talked about Tim and Drex, talked about that beforehand. So that's a bad trend. But is this becoming more mainstream? Is the conversation picking up? Are people actually starting to take this much more seriously? Are the trends there? Are there good trends, bad trends? What are you guys seeing out there from your perspective?
Yeah, let's start with cybersecurity. I think they have to, right? Mm-hmm. We hear Tim and Drex talk about this. But there was an IBM study introduced last year that talked about the average size of an attack is costing them about $10 million.
$10 million.
$10 million as a size that. So that's important. The other aspect is apart from the financial, is to think about how long you can go as a healthcare institution without your information systems, right? Because it will take some time to restore and get back to operational. So this is something that really truly affects the entire business.
Yep.
So cybersecurity, a very important trend, of course.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think that comes with geodiversity on how you retain your data and the copies of your data, and cloud certainly offers some interesting options for that, from geodiversity for your data retention, as well as some increased capabilities to protect against ransomware. And I think that's the big thing today, is really protecting that data and reducing the amount of impact that ransomware has by being able to have those air gap copies, or those gold copies that are immutable or indelible, so that you can quickly restore from a ransomware attack. And his mic is just...
Yeah, it's starting to sag, isn't it? It's
oh, that's great. Anything you would want to add to that?
Yeah, I think as CIOs really go out and look and shop and try to come up with solutions, I think integration is one of the biggest things that I would recommend to assure before you try to develop your solutions. Instead of, we've kind of bolted things together, and I think it's time to take a step back and kind of make it more fluent, make it more integrated for the clinical staff.
Yeah, that's my follow-up question, because we talk about, we haven't talked about interoperability a lot. You talk about integration there, but so where does interoperability play in this? It's a big sector in my world, and so, yeah, please.
huge.
Yeah, when you talk about interoperability, do you mean the standards, the actual data in transit, the security of the data in transit? I mean, what are the components there of interoperability? All of the above?
For me, that's all of it, isn't it? Of course. We need to make sure the data can get to the place where the clinicians, the techs, the nurses are going to be able to use the data, right? And so it is about all of those things. We have healthcare standards, of course. Those standards have technologies. We need to worry about the cybersecurity. So all of those things. And super important, I don't think there's ever going to be a time where healthcare is dominated by one single vendor, despite the attempts. There's always going to be lots of different pieces that have to come together to deliver for the clinicians.
More than ever before, every day. You got it.
I mean, look at the show floor. It's twice as big as it was last year. So always more vendors. So you're always coming into an environment where there is existing stuff. The hospital has existing infrastructure. And so interoperability, integration with those existing components, number one.
Yep. Excellent.
And I think it's thinking outside of the walls of your organization and how you're truly going to make data interoperable for the good of humankind, right? And being able to share that data widely, anonymized or not, however your organization decides to go about it, but to be able to really capitalize on the wealth of data that is captured in a variety of socioeconomic settings, bringing it together so that we can have the most powerful outcomes possible that's going to serve the greatest population possible.
Excellent. Randy? Awesome.
Yeah, I think better patient outcomes come from interoperability.
Absolutely.
And, we're kind of in a day right now where, if you walk in on a radiologist reading a mammogram or a, breast MRI, there's potential that they have, 3 or 4 different systems that they're logging into to read out a breast MR. And that needs to be more fluent.
Excellent. So how do you guys, kind of in closing here, how do you guys, on the interoperability side, is there somewhere you guys point to a standard that you guys like, you support, that you've worked towards, or recommend people, take seriously? I mean, like Smart on Fire or anything like that can help, your world and benefit you and your providers?
Absolutely. And many of them, of course, right? Because there's different aspects. So DICOM, HL7, some of these things have been with us for a long time. But FHIR is a new and emerging one that we're tracking very eagerly to, again, facilitate more information exchange. So that's sort of core to the Canon Medical DNA, is really thinking about the interoperability, thinking about open standards.
Excellent.
I think it's actually taking advantage of data standards that already exist.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, we've had the RADLEX lexicon, for years, but how many organizations still recreate every day what they're going to call an exam or study descriptor? It's like they're already there. Let's use what's already created.
Very true. Excellent. Right?
Yeah, again, I think some more updated regulations around digital versus film would always help, but I think just really keeping your data integrity up is going to be your biggest challenge and your most important challenge.
Excellent. Great advice to close the sector. So thank you very much. Everybody, appreciate your time. Thank you for joining the show today, and I hope you guys have the rest of your conference. Thank you.
Thank you.
Got it. And certainly thank you to everyone that joined me. Mari Savickis, Tim Dawson, Drex DeFord, Jeff, Randy, and Kim. You guys have been terrific. So certainly thank you to Canon Medical for sponsoring this past hour or so. And certainly to CHIME, DHI for the stage. And thank you to everyone for listening. We'll have a great show. We'll pick back up again tomorrow. We'll have Mickey Tripathi, so we'll talk about interoperability much more coming up tomorrow. But we thank everybody for listening here in the audience, everybody online. I'm Justin Barnes, and special thank you for tuning into this Just In Radio. Thank you so much.